Imagine this. It's a regular Friday night in Ireland, the kind where nothing's supposed to happen. You're half asleep on the couch, takeaway in one hand, your show playing in the background, and the world outside feels calm, safe. Except it wasn't. Because while everyone else was winding down, two men, not movie characters, not some dark web myth, were allegedly getting ready to make national headlines for all the wrong reasons. Authorities say these two were part of a plan that, if it had gone ahead, could have changed the tone of the entire weekend news cycle, not with laughter or sports highlights, but with sirens, fear, and smoke. This is Countdown to the Bang: How Ireland's Far-Right Plot Was Stopped Cold. A story that shows just how close things can get before someone steps in and says, "No, not today." It's a case that mixes ideology, explosives, and a kind of twisted self-importance, the type of story that makes you look at ordinary people and think, how does someone get there? Alright, let's meet the main characters of this not-so-Hollywood thriller. First up, Garrett Pollock, 35 years old, from Kilhorne Green, Annalong, County Down, Northern Ireland side. If you saw him in passing, you probably wouldn't think twice. He's not the type that screams headline maker. But according to investigators, what was happening behind closed doors told a very different story. Then there's Carolis Pakoskas, 38, from Newfoundwell Road in Drogheda, County Laois, the Republic side. A quiet area, nothing flashy, nothing suspicious until this story dropped. Two men, two addresses, two countries, one shared idea, and apparently one plan that had everyone on edge. The Guards had been watching quietly for weeks. Information was moving back and forth between them and the police service of Northern Ireland. This wasn't random. This was coordinated, methodical. They were tracking something that didn't sit right. And that's where it gets weird, because at first glance, these weren't hardened criminals. They weren't ex-military, not seasoned operators. They were regular people who, as investigators allege, started to believe they were part of something bigger, something they probably told themselves was patriotic. But let's keep it real, there's a big difference between patriotism and paranoia. And according to what came out in court, this wasn't about protecting anything. This was about targeting innocent people. What stands out most? How normal the setup looked from the outside. No fancy compound, no secret lab, just quiet homes in small Irish towns until the day both addresses turned into active crime scenes. And that's what makes this case chilling. It's not just about ideology, it's about how close ordinary can get to extreme when no one's paying attention. So picture this, it's a normal Tuesday night in County Laois. Nothing wild happening, maybe a few people grabbing chips before heading home, quiet roads, small town calm. And then somewhere near Portlaois, guards pull over a car. At first glance, it's just a stop, a standard check. But this is the kind that flips from routine to national security in a heartbeat. The two men inside Garrett Pollock and Carolis Pakoskas had already been under the radar of an ongoing cross-border operation. The Guards had been working hand in hand with the police service of Northern Ireland, trading intel, connecting dots. They weren't just waiting to catch someone speeding. They were waiting to stop something serious before it started. Now, nobody knew it at that moment, but that car stop was the start of a story that would end up in Portlaois District Court and on every major news site by the weekend. Once that vehicle was stopped, things escalated quickly. The Guards decided to dig deeper. Not long after, search warrants were executed, and that's when the entire plot cracked open. At Garrett Pollock's home in Kilhorne Green, County Down, officers say they found a setup that didn't look like a workshop or a shed, it looked like something out of a crime drama. 3 threaded metal pipes, hexagonal end caps, green firework fuse, items that might mean nothing separately, but together they looked a lot like the ingredients of homemade explosives. And then came the kicker. Detectives also reported finding 4 incendiary-type devices with dishcloth wicks and 6 liters of hydrogen peroxide. 6 liters, that's the kind of chemical you find in hair bleach or cleaning products, but in the wrong hands, it's a red flag. Investigators said the combination looked like the early stages of bomb making. Nothing had gone off yet, but the intention, the pattern, the planning, all of it lined up in a way that made them act fast. And here's the part that always gets me: this wasn't some big city operation. This wasn't Dublin or Belfast. It was quiet, small town Ireland, a regular Tuesday night. You can almost picture the shop lights down the street while all of this was happening in someone's home and car. It shows how fragile normal really is. You think you're safe because you live in a calm town, but sometimes that calm hides the biggest storms. Here's where the story goes from bad to what on earth were they thinking? During the investigation, guards uncover something unexpected: a video file, just sitting there waiting to be found. They open it, and what they see is straight out of a nightmare. Four masked men stand in front of an Irish tricolor. They're reading from a written statement called Rehearsed Confident. It's not a movie scene, not satire, not some edgy internet prank. It's a recorded statement they allegedly planned to release after carrying out a terrorist attack. When that footage was shown in court, Judge Andrew Cody called it exactly what it was: a practice of a statement being released subsequent to a successful terrorist attack. In other words, they weren't fantasizing, they were rehearsing. In the video, these masked men talk about taking violent action. They use language meant to sound patriotic, but it quickly slides into hatred. They talk about sovereignty, about taking back Ireland, and then it goes darker. They start naming targets: IPA's centers, mosques, hotels, housing migrants. They claim responsibility for the destruction of the first mosque introduced in Ireland, supposedly in County Galway. Investigators say that line wasn't factual. It was part of the group's fantasy narrative. But it tells you how far gone they were mentally. They even end with the promise that this will not be our last attack. That line right there sent chills through the courtroom. You could feel it. It wasn't just talk anymore. It was ideology dressed up as action. Then came another discovery: a written manifesto allegedly created by Garrett Pollock. According to Gards, it spelled out the group's vision: part far-right paranoia, part delusional call to arms. It tried to justify violence as defending Ireland. But here's the uncomfortable truth: there's no defending a country by attacking innocent people. What's striking is how small the world of extremism can be. You'd expect something like this to come from a big network or an organized cell, but this looked like a handful of disillusioned men feeding off each other's anger online, convincing themselves they were part of a movement. And this video? It was supposed to be their big statement to the world, the one they'd release after an attack. Except it never made it past rehearsal, because by the time the recording was found, they were already behind bars. Still, that clip left a mark, because even if nothing exploded, it revealed something explosive about where hate can lead when nobody steps in soon enough. Now, this is the part where the story turns into a full-on detective operation, one that stretched across the invisible line between the Republic and the North. Because here's the thing: terrorism doesn't check passports, and ideology doesn't care which flag you live under. So when the guards picked up that signal, they didn't hesitate to call in backup from the Peace Nine. From that moment, it stopped being a local case and became a cross-border investigation. The coordination was tight: messages, warrants, and evidence flying between both forces like chess moves in real time. Every small piece of information got logged, compared, verified. When the guards made their move in County Laois, the Peace Nine were already preparing their own strike up north. At Garrett Pollock's home in Kilhorn Green, analog Peace Nine officers arrived with a search warrant. And let's just say they didn't find a garden shed full of tools. They allegedly found what investigators described as components of pipe bombs, the same kind of gear that matched what was recovered in Laois. Residents nearby were evacuated for safety. Bomb disposal experts were called in. Think about that for a second: an entire quiet street in a northern Irish village suddenly lit up with flashing lights, tape across the road, neighbors peeking out through curtains wondering what's happening. And across the border down south, more guards were combing through evidence in Port Lisha, all in sync, all part of one coordinated effort. This was the first time in a while that the two forces had to work this closely on a far-right extremist case, and they handled it like a single team. When both searches were compared, investigators noticed a pattern. The materials, the design, even the way the devices were stored, all similar. That connection tied the two suspects together more tightly than any phone record could. Now, what's really interesting about this part of the case isn't just the arrests, it's what it says about modern policing. It shows that even in a country as small as Ireland, with a complex border and two police systems, collaboration still works when it matters most. And honestly, that's the biggest win here, because the border used to separate investigations, but this time it helped stop one. So now that we know what happened, the arrests, the searches, the video, the cross-border operation, let's take a step back and talk about why this case actually matters. Because on the surface it looks simple. Two guys caught with suspicious stuff. End of story, right? Not even close. Here's what's so unsettling. Everything about this plot was built out of ordinary things. Hydrogen peroxide, the same stuff you might find in your bathroom cabinet. Metal pipes, the kind you'd pick up at a hardware shop. Even those dishcloth wicks, that's kitchen level normal. And yet, according to investigators, all those innocent items were allegedly being turned into something meant to cause chaos. That's the part that hits you. It's not movie-style villainy, it's small, quiet, almost domestic. It shows how danger doesn't always come wearing black boots and slogans. Sometimes it's just a person with a twisted idea and access to a shop. Now remember that line from their recorded statement, "This will not be our last attack." That's what the judge called out as truly alarming. Because even though no bomb went off, the words alone exposed an entire mindset, one that turns anger into identity. A belief that violence equals meaning. And that's what makes this bigger than just two arrests. Ireland hasn't seen a lot of far-right terror plots. It's not part of the usual crime headlines. So when something like this comes up, it hits differently. It's not only about national security, it's about how modern hate travels, how it disguises itself online, how it can reach into small towns and whisper, "You're the one who's supposed to fix this." And credit where it's due, the Guards and Peace Nine moved fast. They didn't wait for an explosion. They didn't wait for tragedy. They saw the signs, strange activity, suspicious materials, extremist chatter, and acted before it became a headline for the wrong reason. It's proof that prevention works. Quiet police work saved lives. But still there's a darker undercurrent to this. Because if these two men really believed they were defending something, that means someone somewhere made them believe it. And that's the uncomfortable truth. Ideologies don't appear out of nowhere. They spread, they recruit, they repeat. So yeah, this story matters, not just because an alleged attack was stopped, but because it shows how fragile peace can be and how fast people can drift into extremism without anyone noticing. And maybe that's the scariest part. Not the chemicals, not the devices, but the ideas, because those can survive even when the people are locked away. So here's where we close it all out, the part where everything quiets down, the dust settles, and we're left staring at what almost happened. Garrett Pollock and Carolis Pekaska's, two names that barely anyone in Ireland had ever heard of before, now frozen in the middle of a story about ideology, explosives, and timing. And the truth? They were stopped right before things could go off the rails. They had the materials, they had the plan, they had the video. It was all there, ready to turn words into destruction. But thanks to fast coordination between the Guards and the Peace Nine, the whole thing got cut off before it could leave the ground. That's the win. The good news, the part we don't always appreciate enough. Because stopping something before it happens never makes as much noise as cleaning up after it's too late. But here's where it gets dark again, because while the bombs never exploded, something else did. The video they left behind, that so-called practice message, didn't just show intent. It showed confidence, arrogance, a belief that their violent cause was justified. And that's the thing about ideology: you can arrest people, you can confiscate chemicals, but you can't handcuff an idea. That's the part that sticks with you. Because as the court wrapped up that hearing, the judge made it clear this was serious, deliberate, dangerous. And when those words echoed in that courtroom, everyone felt the same quiet thought: if this was the one we caught, how many others are still out there planning the next one? Picture that for a second. You're sitting at your desk, scrolling, watching something, feeling safe. And somewhere, someone's rehearsing a statement like the one those four masked men recorded. They're speaking to a camera, not the world, but to themselves, convincing each other that hate makes sense. That's why stories like this matter. Because it reminds us security isn't just about catching the bad guys. It's about understanding how the idea of hate even got that far. So yeah, they were stopped in time. But the silence that follows the quiet after the arrest, that's the part that feels heavier than any explosion. If this story makes you think about how close it got, hit that subscribe button. Drop a comment and tell me what you think. How many of these plots do you think we never hear about? And remember, it's easy to spot violence when it's loud. The real challenge is seeing it when it's quiet.